What are fairy rings? I mean, if we look back in history, fairy rings are associated with the fae. They're also associated with, you know, different types of vegetation in the area as well. But for a lot of people, especially that live in this area, for example, think that they're a manifestation of a really magical area. And when you step in these, you can step sometimes beyond time into different dimensions, some people would believe. Or on the other hand, they could have a healing experience. And I've known a lot of people have healing experiences within these rings. I've also met somebody that went into a fairy ring quite close to what's called the Enford Barrow, which is the largest mound associated with Stonehenge. There's a massive fairy ring there, and he said he didn't know if he actually fell asleep or if something happened, but he felt he had missing time in that ring. So they could be associated with, you know, time-lapse events as well.
When you're talking about fairy rings, these are often depicted in old illustrations, woodcuts and things like this, and you actually see what appears to be fairies dancing around in a circle, sometimes with the devil involved in it as well. There's often mounds in the image, and it's said that if you mess with the fairies, you go into, or you get kind of attracted into the mound, you actually disappear for years and come out 100 years later and things like this. But there's actual fairy rings people see today. They see these strange rings occur in the ground, and people call them fairy rings, but some people think they're linked with different kind of mushroom spores kind of creating them in this particular arrangement. But there's something to be said about when you're looking at fairy rings to do with balls of light as well being observed, because often they go round in circles, and again this brings it into the whole concept of quite an ancient tradition of crop circles. They're not just a modern phenomenon, and so people have found balls of light linked with these as well. And so are they actually fairy rings?
Throughout history there have been stories of people encountering the fairy folk and undergoing very, very strange experiences. One of the main stories that's told, certainly in European folklore, is that a person will be walking through a field on a path, and they see a mysterious light maybe off to one side, and it seems to be coincident to something like a round barrow, you know, an earthen mound, and this light has never been seen before. They take it to be like an entrance into the mound, so they look in, and as they look in they can hear this music being played, you know, like this sort of dancing music. So they go inside, and there are fairies dancing in a circle. There's often food available, and the fairies will encourage the person to go inside, and they will dance with them. They may eat, and then when they come out, even though they themselves will feel that only a short amount of time has passed, maybe an hour or something, when they come out a year has passed by, or in some cases 100 years. And there's one account which I find particularly intriguing, where this happens to a guy. He goes in, he starts dancing with the fairies, and then what happens is that his mate the next day realises that his friend has not come home, so he goes to the spot where he essentially left him, sees the same phenomenon himself, looks in and sees his friend dancing around with the fairies, and yanks him out as he comes past, thus saving him and saying, well, look, you know, you've been missing for a day or so, and yet the person who was dancing the fairy said, no, I was only dancing here for a few minutes. So that's the sort of story, and of course we can relate this very closely to modern ideas of UFO abductions, where people see lights, they get too close to them, and then they have missing time experiences. And of course, obviously, hypnosis will often reveal that they've been on board a UFO. And of course, in the modern era of flying saucers, we interpret or assume that we're dealing with physical nuts and bolts spacecraft, but it's very clearly the same type of experience. And the first person to make this connection was the French UFO researcher Jacques Vallée, in his book Passport to Magonia, which came out in the 1960s. So there is this definite link between fairies, mysterious lights, time distortion, and ancient sites like barrows or other types of prehistoric monument. So Maria, you brought us to this wonderful fairy ring that we can see behind us now, so close to Silbury Hill, which is there in the background. Avebury's this way, the West Kennet Long Barrow is there. We know that in the past there's been lots of crop circles in this area. So what can you tell us about this fairy ring, and how do you think that it came to be here?
Well, I came walking past here with a woman that I was leading on a tour, and we just looked around and I saw this wonderful fairy ring. And for me, it's about a magical space. It's creating a space on the inside of that circle that takes you away from your everyday life. And I didn't go in it, and I haven't been in it yet, but the lady I was with went in there, and she really did feel some kind of healing force. She'd been ill through various reasons, and she felt something happen to her inside these rings.
So conventionally, what is the explanation for fairy rings like this?
Mushrooms.
Mushrooms. Okay, so the idea is that somewhere beneath the long grass that defines the fairy ring is fungi of some description, and that causes perhaps extra growth of the grass itself. Is that something like that?
Yes, that's correct.
But what we also know is that from certainly medieval times, there was always a connection between these circles and the fairy folk. It was felt that by stepping inside a fairy ring, you were at risk of being abducted by fairies, enchanted by fairies, or perhaps even taken off, to another realm. Now, whether this is correct or not, we don't know, but certainly it's suggestive that they had some kind of potency, some kind of power that people strongly believed in, and that itself, that consciousness driven thought and action, could have acted as a trigger to allow these experiences to take place. So obviously we know that the same title, fairy rings, has also been given to crop circles, which were also known as devil rings, and it was felt that by stepping inside them, people could experience different things, sometimes good, sometimes not so good. So shall we step inside this ourselves? You've not been inside it, I've certainly not been in it yet. Let's go inside it and see what we feel when we go inside. Right, okay, so we're about to step into the fairy ring. Obviously we acknowledge the genius loci, the spirit of the place, and just see if we feel anything. So what's your thoughts so far, would you say?
Well, as we're kind of walking around the circle, I wouldn't say I'm feeling anything dramatic at all, but at one point just over there, I don't know, maybe my head was felt a little bit lighter, but that's what I have felt. But we are inside something that, even if it is mushrooms or fungi or whatever causing this, we're inside what our ancient ancestors thought a sacred space.
And of course, obviously, the other thought is occultists, witches, would do their ceremonies, magic spells, invocations within a circle like this that would be drawn out. So that in itself shows that we're in almost like a natural form of a magic circle. So that alone is going to affect us in some way, and that in association with the natural energies is going to create some kind of response. And I think that no matter how these things are created, they do affect us just like crop circles as well.
I'm gonna have to interject because it's really affecting me.
Really?
Yeah.
When I was in the field talking to Maria before, when we were recording, I saw a blue flash of light. It was quite intense, and I just got a sense of presence in that general area, which was just this area here, just beyond that tree. And when I came into the circle, although I didn't really feel any different, it compounded what had just happened there, which is not very far away. And sitting here now, you, Helena,
I can't even hardly compose myself. It's like this pressure in my solar plexus. Just a little trouble breathing properly.
And Maria, what's your thoughts now you're inside the fairy ring?
Well, I do feel lightheaded. I feel lightheaded and almost like I can breathe, but it feels like my nose is restricting kind of air, is how I feel.
I'm like short of breath, personally.
Yeah, so for me it's like that, but creating a kind of headiness here, almost like over kind of the third eye, upwards. So I can feel a pressure here now on my forehead.
So you have energy kind of rushing either into your forehead. I feel like I have energy rushing into my solar plexus right now. Do you feel anything weird on your body?
No, not at all. But
you're seeing flashes of light.
I've seen flashes of light. It's making me feel that this place is very energetic, and more than that is that I get a sense of presence with it as well, and that sense of presence is something which I feel quite a lot in connection with this. I think it's the same type of intelligence that's connected with the lights, what we'd call the end beings. And you know, in other words, there's something going on a multi-dimensional layer here, and we're only seeing just a very dim echo of that, because we can't perceive beyond the 3 dimensions.
I think I feel a little bit like I'm not completely in my body.
Okay.
Like I'm expanding outwards from my body in a kind of fluid-like feeling, motion. Not that that makes any sense.
And what's that suggesting you want to do?
Probably just lay down for a minute.
That's what I thought, lay down.
And close my eyes and see what happens.
Should we do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'll turn the camera off and try that out.
All right, and then we can, if anything, we can report.
We'll report back when we turn it back on.
Okay. And we have just had a little meditation, that's probably the correct word, to see what we all feel. Maria, Helena, myself. So, ladies first, what would you think?
I feel very weighed down here. Maybe like it's an inflow place. I feel like I'm very magnetized to the ground. I feel like there's a huge kind of weight on my chest, but in a good way, like it's containing me, or it's pulling me down into the earth. I felt like I had roots growing from my solar plexus specifically. When I turned onto my belly when I saw you were on yours, and it was a lot more profound actually that way. I felt very deep within the earth, and it was a good feeling, but also very intense feeling.
Well, for me, when I was led down, like you say, I was on my belly next to the ground. I thought at some point I had this amazing scent rising out of the ground, a beautiful smell, and I do wear perfume, but it wasn't that smell. So for me, it was my senses felt alive, especially the sense of smell.
And that smell is definitely associated with the fairies, particularly the Queen May. She is attended by this incredible smell of flowers, and you know, almost like a sort of flower-based you know, perfume basically. I just get a strong pull into the field where the Silbury Hill is.
I visualized in my meditation, I kept seeing the hill over and over. It was actually very strange.
But I just got a feeling to roughly between us and the hill on the other side there something said to me that there was something there in the past, some kind of monument or a stone or something, or even an energy node, or all of these things in that field, and that it's still incredibly energetic today, and that this was close to where I saw the earlier flash of light, basically.
When I was on my back,
Yeah.
and I was looking up, let's see if I see them right now. I still am. I'm seeing millions of specks of light flying past each other and into each other.
And I got a strong connection with the moon, strong association with the moon. I could see the crescent of the moon.
So they're actually being pushed away, not crossing like into a found position. So it's almost like there's some kind of energy pushing it away. But what I do now is I'll come from the middle out and see if that's the same. And it's the opposite. They've now crossed, indicating energy. So coming in they were repulsed, and from here they have found the edge of a kind of energy ring. See? So they do that and then come in the other way. I can already feel them starting to go. They do that. So it's almost like, in terms of energy, some kind of energy coming out of the ground, almost like creating a wall this way, but allowing the energy to come out that way. That's quite profound. I wasn't expecting that. Now I'll see if I can find any hot spots in the fairy ring.
You mentioned this was a geochimney.
Yeah.
Now refresh me, would that explain the wall effect?
Yeah, quite probably. So this is, according to the French diviners, the remnants pattern of like earth energy pattern called a geochimney or an earth chimney, which they see as concentric rings of energy, and then with some kind of what's called arms reaching out. So this is the perimeter of it here. So that's part of it as well. But I think there's something more going on as well, because I think it's, as we're coming in, the energy is contained within the circle, because it's making my rods, what's called repulse, go the other way. So maybe this is more higher energy in here than there is outside.
Well, that's what a vortex location would entail, right?
Well, yeah. A geochimney or an earth chimney was discovered about sort of 40 years ago throughout Europe, and the European master dowsers noticed that there's a natural grid that's kind of like a vortex every 10 meters across the planet where you have land surface. So you don't find it in the seas, for example. It's energy coming out of the ground like a vortex, but at the same time energy coming into it as well, and that generates a huge circle. And it was found in France from the 1960s onwards that so-called fairy rings and certain vegetation are attracted to these earth chimneys, and they can create circles. Again, they're doing it there again. So a step over, put them back into search, and then they're crossing here.
Are we about halfway in?
I don't know, but this seems to be a focal point here. So where we are in the circle, probably
and if you come
not halfway, probably I think a quarter of the way.
What
Maybe.
about the middle? How does the middle affect?
Again, energy going out. See, it's very hard to explain because it's doing the opposite when you go that way. That's the thing. So if I head towards that way, they cross and don't repulse. So I'd have to, spend some time thinking about this actually.
Is this a little bit odd?
Yeah, normally it's kind of a little bit more consistent. See, there we go. Yeah, when I come in, they repulse. So I'm going to think about what's going on here. I'm not sure at this moment.
We found another fairy ring, this time at a place called Carnaby near Bridlington and the Rudstone Monument, and you can see that it surrounds a small yew tree, which are often associated with churchyards, but in this occasion we've actually got all of the mushrooms as part of that circle, which is a feature of the creation of these fairy rings.
Crazy.